you comfy? Hey, better? Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel and welcome to the first official sit down video since Jonah has arrived with us in the world. So here he is. If you didn't see my other video, I've had to put the camera up quite high, so I'm not sure if you can see him, but he's here, he's sleeping. He's just had a bottle, so he's just having a nap. But yeah, welcome back to my channel. It feels like it's been ages and I've been really looking forward to sitting down and doing this video. So if you've found this video, I'm guessing that maybe you are approaching birth or are just interested in birth stories, like I was. But just to preface this video, this is just my experience. Obviously, I'm not a medical professional or anything like that. I'm just chatting about my personal experience, and overall, I feel like we went through quite a lot, but for me, it was just the most positive experience. It was just like the most magical experience of my life. Just nothing comes close. I mean, me and Grant have been really lucky. We've done a lot of travelling, we've done so many different experiences together, and we would both say that hand on heart, Jonah's labour and birth was just the most intense, incredible, scary, amazing, magical experience of our lives tenfold. Just nothing even comes close. And I was with one of my really good friends recently who is due to give birth in about a month and a half, and we were chatting about my birth story and what happened and my experience, and I said to her that I'm just so excited for her because I hope that she has the most amazing birth, but I'm just so excited for her because for us it was just such a great positive experience, and I'm so thankful for that. I know that not everybody has the same experience. I think every birth is just super unique and very personal, but I just wanted to share my story and my experience basically. So I will start with, well, I'll just start at the beginning. So I have got my phone here because I had to write down everything in my notes because I basically forgot a lot of things, and Grant had to sit down with me a few days after the birth and we went through everything sort of hour by hour to jog my memory and remember kind of what happened. But basically I finished work on the Friday. I finished work for my maternity leave on the Friday, and I had planned to have 2 weeks of maternity leave, just relaxing, getting the nursery ready, the final bits, watching Netflix, eating takeaways, and then I went into labour on the Tuesday morning. So I ended up getting 1 official day of mat leave when I had planned to hopefully get 2 before my due date. So he came early, which really surprised me. In my mind, I really genuinely thought he was going to be late and we were going to be waiting for ages, but yeah, he came almost 2 weeks early, so he definitely surprised us there. So on the Tuesday morning at about 8 AM-ish when I woke up, I had like period style cramps, but I felt like I'd had those for the last kind of sporadically throughout the last few months of my pregnancy, so I didn't really think much to them. And in my mind, I kept thinking that like labour wasn't even really on my mind at that point because I was just assuming that we still had a full 2 weeks to go. But yeah, I had like these period style cramps, and then by about 3 PM in the afternoon they had turned into like more significant contractions, and I think that was when I kind of messaged Grant to check he was on his way home from work at the right time, and to check that yeah, he'd be coming home at usual time, because I was starting to get a bit like, I think these are contractions. They just became like more significant and they were more intense period type cramps. So I was having those, and I had some paracetamol about 6:30 that night, and we had some chicken paella for tea and just watched some TV, and then I had a bath, which definitely helped. It helped me just feel more relaxed, and it did help with the pain. And in my mind, I just really didn't want to go to hospital too soon. because I knew that if I wasn't dilated and had to come home, I just think that mentally I'd have just really struggled with that, with having to come home and wait and then knowing when to go back. But we were measuring the contractions with an app that I just downloaded from the Play Store, and they were quite frequent, but the pattern was a bit irregular. So we had called the hospital a couple of times, and they'd said, as long as you're happy and comfortable at home, then just try and stay at home, and you know, take baths, paracetamol, breathe in, all those kind of things to just keep yourself calm and relaxed. And then when they become a bit more regular in a pattern, give us a call back. So we did that, and I had some more paracetamol at 10:30, and then I managed to actually get a few hours of sleep. I don't know how I did it, but I was kind of in and out of sleep. The contractions weren't that bad at that point, like they were uncomfortable, but I don't even really remember them being really bad at that point. But sort of getting into the early hours of the morning, and on reflection, this is probably when we should have gone to hospital, but it got to about 3 a.m. and I had some more paracetamol and I had another bath, and by this point the contractions were getting stronger and stronger and more painful, and I kind of just hung on in there for a few more hours of just trying to relax. I was just walking up and down, I was just pacing. I think I said that I had another bath, which didn't really help this time, and the pain was increasing until it got to probably about 6 or 7 a.m. and that's when I said to Grant, like, I need to go to hospital now. I couldn't speak through the contractions. They were just like taking over my whole body, and it made me feel like I vividly remember standing on my tiptoes, and I don't know why, but every time a contraction came it was so painful. I felt like I had to like stretch my whole body up, and I was like standing on my tiptoes, and it was just a really intense pain that kind of took over all of my body and then would kind of calm down, and I could feel my muscles relax a bit more until the next contraction. And at that point we tried to ring the hospital again, but we couldn't get through, and I just said to Grant, no, I know that now I need to go to hospital. I know that now I'm ready, I need to go. So we set off for hospital, which I think we must have set off at about 7 or 7:30 in the morning, so we were obviously in rush hour trying to get to the hospital, which wasn't ideal at all. And I remember again sitting in the car and looking over at Grant's sat-nav and just counting down the minutes on the sat-nav until we got to hospital, and I was just trying to like focus on breathing, and I had the window like all the way down. It was quite cold that morning, but I had like the window all the way down. I had like the wind in my face. I was just trying to like breathe through them, and yeah, by that point we definitely knew that without a doubt I was in labour because I was in so much pain. And it was difficult to sit still in my chair in the car. So yeah, we're on our way to hospital, and we arrived at hospital at about 8 a.m. and the hospital that I gave birth at has a bit of a drop-off zone, and I'd said to Grant, just drop me off at the front door, and God bless him, he drove into the car park and I was shouting at him, just drop me off. And then we did find a place to just sort of dump the car. So we dumped the car and we started walking into the hospital, and again, Grant, bless him, was trying to encourage me to get to the front door to get in so that we could get seen, but I just couldn't walk quick and I had to keep stopping. And I remember saying to him, I can't walk fast. And then there was the nicest lady who worked at the hospital. She was in her scrubs on her way in to start, I guess, her morning shift, and she saw us and was like, oh, is she in labour? And she ran inside the hospital, grabbed a wheelchair, literally ran back out to us. It was a bit dramatic. And then I got in the wheelchair and she helped us get inside the hospital. So I was so thankful, because I actually don't think I could have made it walking by that point. Like, I was just in so much pain, and I was starting to things were starting to go a bit blurry from the pain, and yeah, I was starting to lose it a little bit, and I wouldn't really say panic, but I was just in the unknown at that point, and because I wasn't in the hospital yet, I was just like concerned. So we got in the hospital, we got up to the labour ward, and I don't know if you normally would go into a area where they assess you, but I got put immediately into a private room with like an ensuite toilet and things. And I feel so bad about this, but the midwives introduced themselves. I had a midwife and a student midwife, and I just said I'm going to be sick, and then I just went into the toilet, and because I couldn't bend over from the pain, sorry in advance by the way if you are a bit squeamish about vomiting and things, because I chat a bit about that in this video, but I was just sick like immediately as soon as I got into the labour room, and I couldn't bend down because of the pain, so I was just stood over the toilet just vomiting basically, and it was just like really aggressive. And I just felt yeah, just like really poorly and just not kind of quite with it. And I think that that was a mix of the adrenaline, the pain, excitement, just everything from the last 12 hours, like tired, well, last 24 hours I guess, like the tiredness and everything. And the student midwife, I remember, was so kind. She was like holding my hair back and just encouraging me and telling me I'm okay and keeping me calm, because Grant was bringing the bags into the room and stuff. So yeah, I arrived and was immediately sick, so felt terrible about that. Oh, and I wrote down that the midwives were Shannon and Ailey, and I was in room 1 on the labour ward. I don't know why I wrote down these little details, but it's just nice to remember because they were both just incredible throughout the whole thing. So I got on the bed and had gas and air, and I had another midwife, a third midwife came in and assessed me. And this is where things all start to just go a bit blurry from here on in, really, because I don't know if it was because of the medication or the pain, probably a mixture, but this is where from here on in Grant had to help me fill in a lot of the gaps because I didn't remember a lot of stuff. So I do remember this though, that the third midwife assessed me, and she asked me where I thought I was, and I said, I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 centimetres, I had no idea. And she said she thought that we were at 8 centimetres dilated, which I remember being really shocked at. I couldn't believe that we had potentially got to 8 centimetres and I hadn't had, well, just on paracetamol. And yeah, I just didn't expect it. And I think, especially because Jonah is our first baby, it was all just in the unknown to us. So anyway, she thought we were about 8 centimetres dilated, and she continued coaching me on the gas and air. And then one of the head midwives, the head of the labour ward, was assessing if my waters had broken, the head position, all those kind of things. I'm not really sure in retrospect why several midwives ended up assessing us, but that happened. And she said she was going to be a bit more stingy, and she thought we were more like 6 or 7 centimetres dilated. But she was unsure if there was meconium in my waters, which is basically when your baby has pooed inside of you. I also remember her saying to Grant, does she still want the epidural because she's already 6-7 centimetres dilated? And I remember clearly hearing that and being like, yes, I want the epidural, I 100% want the epidural. That was the only thing that I guess I had like in my kind of birth plan, was that I wanted an epidural. Everything else I was really go with the flow, really relaxed about, but I wanted an epidural. And at this point I was on the gas and air and I just really wasn't with it from here on in. The pain was just taking over everything, and I was just trying my best to focus on kind of using the gas and air and listening to the midwife that was coaching me. But Grant filled me in that at this point Jonah's heart rate dropped, and one of the midwives told him to press the emergency button. and Grant said that like 7 extra doctors, nurses, midwives just flooded the room. And bless him, I know that he was really scared at that point because he wasn't sure what was going on. But he said that they gave me something for the pain. He's not sure what, and neither am I, because I don't remember any of this. I don't remember the emergency button being pressed at all. The extra doctors came in and they ended up putting a sticker inside me on Jonah's head to, I think it was to measure his heart rate. I think it was to measure his pulse or his heart rate, something like that, just to measure it a bit closer. So they ended up doing that, and then the anesthesiologists arrived. This is all over the course of a few hours, by the way. I'm just kind of chatting through my list because so much happened. But the anesthesiologists came in and set up for the epidural, and that happened at 10 a.m. And then from there on in, I was kind of in and out of sleep for like 12 hours throughout the rest of the day. And again, I thought all of this had happened over the course of a few hours, but afterwards I realised that it was actually over like the whole of Wednesday, like the whole day. So after I had the epidural, which by the way, I actually didn't feel at all. It wasn't painful for me personally at all going in. I didn't feel it. I don't know if that was because I was preoccupied with the pain of the contractions and trying to stay still so that they could do it. I remember them telling me that I needed to stay still. I was going to fall off the bed. And in my mind, I kept thinking, I know where the bed is. I'm not going to fall off it. I just need to get this. I just need to try and stay still to get this epidural in. And anyway, thankfully it was successful. And after that, I was much more comfortable. And like I say, just in and out of sleep all day. And I had a catheter fitted, and my observations were sort of continuously taken throughout the day. They kept doing the cold spray test where they spray a cold, I don't really know what it is, I think it's just a canister of cold compressed air, but they spray it up the side of your leg and chest to check where you are numb. And I also had a boost button on my epidural, so if the pain became like intense again or something, I could use the boost button, and I also still had my gas and air. So yeah, I was really comfortable from here on in. My observations that were being taken showed up that there were markers for an infection. So I had a IV drip with antibiotics. Sorry if the angles change, we just had to have a quick little break and a reposition so that you're comfy. Hey, that better? Throughout the day, there was also, I remember 3 plainclothes doctors visiting, and I'm not really sure who they were. They did introduce themselves, but I can't remember. And they did an assessment as well, I think, to just check that they were happy with the course of action that we were taking. But anyway, I vomited again in the afternoon, and we think that that is when my waters actually broke, because they hadn't done up until that point. But I do remember that I was sick at one point and it was blue, and yeah, it was just really strange. I'm guessing because of the different medications I was on. After I had had the contractions, sorry, the epidural, the contractions had basically slowed right down, which is quite typical with an epidural. So it was then decided that my IV drip, we would put some like inducement medication through the IV drip, and then at 8:30 p.m, so basically like the whole day, at 8:30 p.m, I was then fully dilated, and the midwives decided to do a passive hour to allow the baby to drop more, and they were still unsure which position he was in. And at this point, the midwives that we'd had throughout the day, their shift had actually ended, and our new midwives were Jade and Hayley. And I actually knew Jade, so that was so nice because it was a familiar face, and I just felt super comfortable and really well cared for with her. By 9:30 we started pushing, so we were still in the labour ward room and we started pushing, and because of the epidural I couldn't really feel when I was having contractions, so the midwives were coaching me through it and helping me to push down into my bottom basically, and coaching me through what to do, when to do it, how long to do it for, when to breathe. And yeah, I didn't really feel much of anything because I had the epidural and it was working really effectively, thankfully. I did that for about an hour until 10:30, and we were still pushing, but we had a couple of, I guess they were like consultants or doctors. They were in different coloured scrubs anyway, but there were a couple of ladies who I think were like consultant doctors who came in, and I had seen them throughout the day as well, but I can't really remember why or what was going on. But these ladies made the decision to have a chat with me that they thought that he was actually in a position where he was back to back and his head was sideways, so literally like back to back, and his head was completely sideways like that. So I think that that was potentially why I was in so much pain with the contractions initially, because he was back to back. They had a chat with me and they said, you know, we've been doing this for a long time now. We've been trying to get him to arrive just naturally, I suppose, but we think he's going to need a bit of help, and we need to start thinking about going to theatre. And at this point, again, I was still kind of in and out of it, and I wasn't really too concerned, but I know that Grant was obviously completely aware and was a bit like, okay, this isn't something that we really prepared for, but you know, I think when you're in that situation you just want to do whatever is best for your baby. So the doctors helped us to make the decision to go to theatre and do an assisted birth with the use of forceps. And if that didn't work, then the last resort option that we agreed to was going to be C-section. I had to sign a consent form and they read out all of the possibilities and all of that kind of thing that comes with any kind of surgery, I guess. So we got all prepped for theatre, and Grant had to put his scrubs on and a like hospital hat, and he had to wear these Crocs. So we were like full in theatre gear, and then we were wheeled through into one of the theatre rooms, and I remember thinking that I felt like I was on an episode of Casualty or 24 Hours in A&E or something, because I'd just never seen anything like that. Thankfully I've not had to spend much time in a hospital before, so everything was completely new to me. But they did the thing where they say like 1, 2, 3 and then move you onto the bed. So they did that. There was like the huge theatre lights, and they had to do, I remember they had to do like a register, a roll call where they said their names and what their position was. And there was a lady who did a check that everybody had their equipment, that everybody was happy to proceed and go ahead, and all of this kind of stuff. So that was quite exciting to me. Like, I found it quite interesting in my kind of half awake state, but I remember just thinking really vividly, I really remember this. Oh dear, are you having a dream? Hey. I remember really clearly thinking that I literally don't care what happens to me, and I've never really thought something like this before. I just remember thinking that I really don't care what pain I feel, what I feel at all. I just want him to arrive here safely. And I think that that kind of took over in my brain, because I was just like, we need to do this one way or another. He needs to arrive healthy, and that was just the only thought really that was going through my mind. I think I had a different anaesthetic via my epidural line, and I remember the anaesthesiologist man that was doing it, I think his name was Paul maybe, but I remember him being like really funny, and he kept making us laugh, and he was chatting to us about Indy, our dog, and all things like that. And then when everything was ready, I basically had my legs in these big stirrups. And I also remember that because the stirrups were like really high up, they took a lot of pressure off my back, and I remember thinking that I was like, oh, this is really comfortable. Like, I didn't realise that there was so much pressure until my legs were raised, and then I've just felt so comfortable. But basically, when everything was in position and everything was ready, I had a midwife and the anaesthesiologist who were monitoring my contractions and coaching me, telling me when to push. As I was pushing, the 2 doctors were at the end of the bed and they were trying to turn his head, and they did manage to turn him. Yeah, you trouble causer. Yeah. They did manage to turn his head, but as they managed to turn him and were about to use the forceps, he actually turned back, so he was like looking sideways again. So they had to go in and turn him again, and then they were able to use the forceps to pull as I was pushing. And then I don't know how many pushes, maybe like 5 or 6, maybe more, I really can't remember. But after doing that, he was born and arrived into the world with us at 11:49 p.m. and he weighed 7 pounds 2. So they needed to make a cut on me whilst they were using the forceps to deliver him. So basically from there he was taken and he was put on my chest for like a few seconds, I think. Because of the epidural, I was shaking really bad and I couldn't hold him or like touch him really. So they took him into a separate room just to make sure everything was okay with him, because he wasn't crying when he was born. He was just like, Grant said that he was just looking around. And also I didn't have a curtain up when we were pushing and he was born. I think they only do that if you have a C-section. So I was able to kind of see everything that was going on and when he was born and things. But yeah, they took him into a side room just to, I think, just make sure everything was okay. Meanwhile, they were stitching me up, and then they brought him back out to Grant, who was able to hold him, and we were just, literally, we were both just staring at him, and we were just in awe that our baby was here, and this little soul that we had dreamt about and been loving for the last 9 months was actually here, and we could see his little face. And it's bizarre, but it felt like I already knew him, like I already recognised him, and yeah, we just had like an absolute immediate love for him. And oh, it was just so emotional. Like, Grant was crying, I was just a wreck as well, just after everything. It was just the biggest wave of emotion. So again, I thought all of this took about 10 minutes, but Grant said he thinks we were there for about an hour whilst they were stitching me up. But when we were finally ready to leave theatre, they put me back onto my hospital bed and we went back into the labour ward room where we'd been all day. And whilst the midwives just completed some of the paperwork and things, we were able to spend a few hours in there with Jonah. So this is sort of early hours of the morning by this point. And I also vividly remember we had some tea and toast and orange juice, and they were those little orange juices that you get on a plane that are in like a plastic cup with a lid on. And because I hadn't eaten or drank, well, the only thing I'd had to drink the previous day was water, guzzling these orange juices. They were just like the most delicious thing in the world, and they were just so nice. I think I had about 4. Oh, and that's just reminded me as well, I completely forgot that during the day whilst I was in labour, there was something going on with, I didn't have enough fluid, or I was like really dehydrated and I wasn't passing any urine. So throughout the day as well, I also had fluids via an IV drip. And yeah, we weren't really too sure why that was happening, but I had to keep sipping my water and having fluids via IV to try and keep me hydrated. But anyway, it was kind of early hours of the morning and he'd just been born. We were having our orange juice. We called our parents on FaceTime and let them know what was going on. Oh, and also my mum, God bless her, had got to the point where she was quite worried, and she'd actually rang the labour ward to check on me and see what was going on, because obviously it had been such a long day, and then we ended up in theatre, so I know my mum like was so worried, which obviously you would be. So I remember Jade, our midwife who was there when Jonah was born, letting me know that my mum had rung to just check that we were okay, and she had said that we were all fine and that Grant was going to be giving her an update soon. Then we were moved to the maternity ward, and at that point Grant had to go home. So then I just remember being in my bed in the maternity ward, finally on my own after just like the craziest 48 hours, and I just remember looking over at Jonah and just thinking, like, you're so precious and tiny, and I just can't believe you're ours and that we made you. It was just the most amazing few hours. Like, I don't know how long I was just staring at him for, but it was just like just the best. I ended up spending 4 nights and 5 days there, so I think that was when I realised that I maybe had actually been quite poorly, because a lot of the ladies that I saw were generally in and out within 24 hours. So by the end of it, I felt like a long-term resident. Okay, we're back again after a nappy change. But it's going to be getting time for your bottle soon, so I'll try and wrap this up quick. I don't want it to be super long. But yeah, we got onto the maternity ward and ended up being there for like 4 nights, which basically involved just lots of monitoring. I ended up having an iron transfusion, and another course of antibiotics through my IV drip, and they kept calling my IV drip my handbag because I had to carry it everywhere with me. Like, if I went to the toilet, I had to wheel my IV drip thing with me everywhere. But thankfully Jonah was really well. The only thing we really had to be concerned about was that he had a little bit of jaundice, which he very nearly needed treatment for. We nearly had one of the billy beds with the big blue lights, and his little paper suit that he nearly had to go in, but thankfully his levels were just below the treatment line and they progressively got better, so thankfully he didn't need to have any of that. He did just have some bruises and scratches on his head from the forceps delivery, but they cleared up really quickly. And he did really well, bless him. He was just an absolute dream. And I'll always actually like really cherish those kind of first 4 days in hospital together, because after visiting hours, when it was like just me and Jonah, we were able to just really enjoy being with him. And because I wasn't at home, I wasn't like worrying about doing the washing or entertaining people or anything like that. We were just in our own little newborn bubble in the hospital. And after visiting hours, when everyone would go home, I would try and go for a little walk around the ward with him. And I don't know if you've ever been at a hospital at night time, but it's so different to during the day. I don't know, a lot of people probably would disagree with me on this, but I just found it really peaceful. And we would go for a little walk around the ward at night together, just kind of shuffle in really slowly, but we'd go for a little walk. And yeah, it was just a long 4 nights, but I knew that we were in the best place, and I was just glad to be there and have the treatment and care that the wonderful midwives, nurses and doctors gave us. So by the Sunday afternoon we were able to come home and yeah, start to settle into a bit of a routine at home and getting used to having him here with us. But yeah, that's everything that I've got down in my notes. That is everything in a nutshell. That is my birth story with my first baby, Jonah. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you are watching and you are an expectant mum, or if you just enjoy watching these videos, I hope you enjoyed it. I hope maybe it's useful, and I really hope that it could maybe bring some comfort to you. Like I say, for me personally, it was overall just such a positive experience, and yeah, we got to meet our baby boy at the end of it, which is just the most precious, special gift. Please let me know down in the comments below if you had anything similar happen to you, or if you had something completely different in your birth story. I find it really interesting to know about all of those kind of things and chat about them. So yeah, I'll also leave my Instagram handle down below too if you want to go and connect over on there and chat. So yeah, thank you for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.